I'm Perren-Jones from the Isla Verde Massage Center in Boquete, Panama. What I'm going to teach you today are the three major causes of lower back pain. Now, the biggest problem for people with lower back pain is they might get treatment to get fixed, but they've never actually learned what caused this pain in the first place. And as you're about to see today, there are three major causes to lower back pain. Once you know this, it's a bit like this. If you don't learn what's hurting your back, it's very much like you hitting your thumb. Imagine yourself hitting your thumb with a hammer. Okay, if you kept hitting that, and then you got treatment, and then you went back to hitting your thumb with a hammer, not knowing that hitting your thumb with a hammer was causing the pain, then you'd just be spending thousands of dollars on treatments and never getting rid of the cause. Now the problem is, just like your lower back, if you hit your thumb with a hammer very lightly, it might not hurt the first few times, but if you keep doing that, these tiny micro traumas will add up until finally it gets very painful, and even the lightest tap will cause enormous pain. Now your backs can be exactly the same. Alright, so what I'm going to teach you today is cause number one, which is very few backs, by the way, are affected by cause number one, and that's a major trauma. So if someone has a very big accident which blows a disc, let's say they're on a snowmobile, and they're riding along in a flexed position with and you'll learn a lot more about this, with their backs in a rounded position like this, and they go over a big jump and then bang, land down, put enormous forces, actual forces through the spine, and can blow a disc that way. Very few people actually have a large trauma like that. The next two are what's causing the majority of lower back pains. Now the first is repetitive trauma. Now a repetitive micro trauma. So think of it this way. Here's a scale. Here you have 0. Here is your 100 up here is your lower back. At 100, perfectly healthy back. Okay, the thing is, let's say a man is lifting boxes, just light boxes, but he's flexing his lower back, which you're going to learn about more, is the way you must not do it. Alright? You must have, just like we talk about with the weightlifter, he has that inward lordotic curve, or neutral spine as it's called. You're going to learn a lot more about this because this is vital for your back health. Once you curl that back and put that lower back into flexion, then you're in trouble. Now, so let's say we've got a man picking up those boxes. It doesn't hurt, but he does this all day. Repetitive trauma. Flexed, rounded lower back, continuing to do this. Now, what's happening is this. Every time he lifts, he's losing those 100 credits. Each time he picks up, down goes 1. So now he's 99. Picks up another box. Micro trauma, until finally he runs out of credits. Each of those micro traumas, it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back. And then that last lift, if you like, lifting a pencil off the floor or the soap in the shower, and then bang, failure, the tissues are damaged, and he's laid up on the bed for 2 days, can't move. That's what happens. Cause number 2, repetitive micro trauma. Finally, the straw that breaks the camel's back, and that's what happens. Back doesn't go out. There are no such thing as slip disc. This is what happens. Ligament tissue damage, maybe even bulging disc damage, and we'll go into this as well, as the fibers of the disc also can get torn. Okay, number 3, so we've got number 1 is a large trauma, not that common. Number 2, very common, repetitive, poor lifting techniques. In other words, a flexed lower spine, not using that bending at the hips, neutral spine. And number 3 is sustained trauma. So in other words, someone is, let's say they're weeding in the garden, or they're doing something with, again, flexed lower back. There's your problem right there. But they're down there for a long time. Okay, so let's say they do that for hours, doing this in the garden like this. Now, what happens? Same thing. Starts off with a healthy lower back, but just all that time, either slouch sitting or bending over badly, finally those points meet again, that trauma sustained, and then down go your credits until bang, you go to get up, or some simple movement, and then you're in a world of trouble again. Your back's, as you may have thought, gone out. Alright, it doesn't go out. We'll go into that in more detail another time. The thing you need to take away from this, you must not slouch, causing flexion in that spine. you must be sitting, and I'll talk about different sitting postures because, okay, sitting in good posture is a good idea, but it's not the only, again I'll go into this in more detail, but just sitting in one position is not good for you. No matter how good your posture is, sitting in one position is still traumatic as well. So we're going to look at sitting positions and what is the best with that as well as we go on. For the moment, what I want you to know are the three major things you must, well, you're going to try and avoid a major accident, of course, but the other two very common things are bending badly, causing repetitive micro-trauma, and just bending badly for long periods of time, or sitting slouched for long periods of time, whether it be driving or at the computer, because that continues to traumatize those ligaments, okay, and your soft tissues, and finally you get to failure. The thing with when you're sitting and you're bending badly is what you're doing is pushing those vertebrae into flexion in your lower back. Imagine my two hands are vertebrae, you're pushing them into flexion, that then pushes the disc posteriorly back this way, and what happens, that strains those ligaments that are encapsulated around that disc. It's continuing forces on those, and then eventually those ligaments fail, they will tear. The posterior fibers of the annulus fibrosus of the disc can tear as well. You can get disc bulges, herniations if it's bad enough. And what happens then, generally it's the lowest level of the vertebrae, L5-S1, and the sciatic nerve is right there, and that's what sciatica is. Sciatica is a symptom, not a cause, okay? So discs, I think it's about 75% of discs blow at L5-S1 because the bottom of the stack, that's where the most pressure is, and the two curves change. But what happens is L5-S1 is where the sciatic nerve is, and that's why when a disc bulges, it can affect that sciatic nerve, and that's why sciatica is very common. Okay, so what you want to do at all times when you are bending forward, all right, you need to be bending at the hips, keeping that neutral spine, that inward lower arch. Think of the weightlifter. He doesn't pick up the weights with a flexed spine. He's like this, okay? So I'll show you three different lifting techniques as well, because you might think you've heard, oh, I know how to lift, you know, close to my body, all this sort of thing, lift up, straight back, use your legs. Well, that's good, but if you're picking up pencils or little things off the floor, you don't want to do that because you're going to have a knee problem pretty shortly, or two knee problems, because it's very stressful on the knees. So I'll show you a couple of alternatives that completely protect your back to pick up things off the ground. Okay, so just remember, the major cause of back pain is flexing this lower back. This is how people's backs get into big problems. Keep that neutral arch. Now, if you're in the garden, you can still have that neutral arch. You can, and I'll go into this again in more detail in another post, but just remember for the moment, bend at the hips, not flexing the lower spine. Your back will be so much better just from doing this. You're going to stop hitting that thumb with a hammer is what you're doing.